At -40 degrees Fahrenheit, at even a modest wind, an exposed skin can freeze in roughly 10 minutes. You do not need to touch the snow for your body to be in danger. Heat leaves through the air, through damp clothing, and through every surface beneath the sleeper. Fingers lose coordination. Breath becomes moisture. A layer that felt warm at sunset can become a cold, wet problem before morning. Yet Inuit families in the Central Arctic slept through winter nights inside snow houses without a wood stove, without a large fire, and without woven blankets. It looks like a room made of snow. It is actually a system for controlling where heat escapes, where cold air collects, and where the human body is placed inside that temperature gradient. I'm Birch. I study how traditional cold climate engineering worked before electricity. If cold climate engineering is what brought you here, subscribe and stay with me. The first mistake is imagining that survival depended on making the interior hot. A large fire would demand fuel that was scarce across much of the Arctic. It would also add moisture and too much heat to a structure whose stability depended on controlled temperatures. The snow house worked because it slowed heat loss. Overheating it could damage the conditions that made it useful. The second mistake is sealing every opening. Sleeping bodies release moisture with every breath. Clothing and skins carry additional dampness. A small oil lamp, when used, also required air. Without controlled ventilation, moisture accumulated inside the shelter and reduced the value of the insulation people depended on. The third mistake is simply adding more clothing. More layers can become dangerous when they trap sweat. Damp fabric cools the skin, compresses insulation, and can push the body toward hypothermia. That is why the sleeping system cannot be understood as wear everything and close the door. The structure, clothing, bedding, airflow, and body all had to work together. This video reconstructs that historical system from ethnographic and material records while explaining how its parts interacted. It is not a modern shelter, fire, or ice building tutorial. The important point is the engineering relationship. Each part limited a different path of heat loss, and no single part was enough by itself. That is also why a heated modern room can still feel cold. Air temperature is only one term in the equation. A cold floor, damp fabric, exposed surfaces, and moving air can pull heat away even when a thermostat says the room is warm. Most people recognize the shape of an igloo. Far fewer are shown the complete thermal arrangement inside it. In the next section, I'll trace that arrangement from the low entrance tunnel to the raised sleeping platform, then through the skins, the snow blocks, and the small controlled sources of heat that made the whole system work. Cut the snow house in half and the answer begins below the sleeping place. At one end, a low entrance tunnel rises into the main chamber. The floor then rises again into a broad sleeping platform, while a small opening near the upper surface allows controlled ventilation. If you follow those changes in height from left to right, the shelter separates cold air, occupied air, and escaping air without adding interior walls. Cold air occupies the lowest zone, the entrance passage and the floor near it. Colder air collects there, while heat from bodies and the lamp moves higher in the chamber. The shelter still exchanges air through the entrance, upper opening, and porous snow. The tunnel keeps the coldest incoming air below the level where people rest. As your eye moves upward in the diagram, the first mechanism becomes visible. The bed is placed above the coldest air. Above that zone, the raised platform solves a second form of heat loss. A body lying against snow loses heat through direct contact, especially where body weight compresses clothing and collapses its trapped air spaces. Inuit families covered the platform with caribou skins. In documented Nunavik use, a warm caribou skin mattress is called a Qulliq. Caribou hair holds air beneath the sleeper, where compressed clothing provides less insulation. That layer gives you a protected boundary between the body and snow. This pays off the title's reference to no blankets. The sleepers did not depend on woven European-style blankets, but they were not exposed to bare snow. Caribou skins served as mattresses, robes, and sleeping covers. The thermal task was to preserve still air around the body and interrupt conduction into the platform. Beyond the skins, the snow shell handles the wind. Moving air strips away the thin layer of warmth near the body and replaces it with colder air. The blocks enclose a compact chamber and stop that cycle. Snow insulates because its structure traps air. The wall's job is to slow heat movement long enough for modest sources inside the chamber to matter. Chamber size strengthens that effect. A larger room contains more air to warm and more wall area through which heat can escape. The chamber matched its occupied volume to the number of people. If you place the sleeping platform, tunnel, and dome on one diagram, each shape reduces a different loss. Cold air exposure, contact with snow, wind, and excess interior volume. Now add the heat sources. Each resting person releases a steady amount of body heat. Several occupants contribute to the same small chamber. As you place a Qulliq near the platform, keep its scale in view. It is a shallow, hand-scale stone lamp, commonly fueled with marine mammal oil. Its flame provides light, supports cooking and warming food, helps manage damp clothing, and adds controlled heat near the occupied zone. Its scale matters. The heat comes from a hand-scale flame rather than a wood stove or large open fire. That distinction pays off no wood and no fire. The system avoids dependence on firewood in a landscape where usable wood can be scarce. The phrase "no fire" means no large wood fire heating the room. Many inhabited snow houses use the smaller flame of a Qulliq. You can now see the full heat budget. Body heat and a limited lamp flame enter a chamber designed to lose heat slowly. Ventilation protects that budget from becoming a moisture problem. Sleepers release carbon dioxide and water vapor. Snow carried on clothing adds dampness. The Qulliq consumes oxygen and produces combustion gases. Air must leave through controlled openings while replacement air enters lower down. This description records a historical system. It is not a modern shelter or flame use tutorial. Unstable snow, enclosed combustion, and inadequate ventilation can be fatal when materials, weather, or construction differ. Both obvious solutions from the opening now close their loops. If you drive more heat toward the snow surface, melting, dripping, structural damage, and fuel demand all increase. Extra clothing could also create trouble inside the compact chamber if it caused sweating. Moisture in garments and bedding reduces the air spaces that provide insulation, then becomes more dangerous when the wearer returns to colder conditions. The shelter worked by controlling heat and moisture together. A caribou-skin lining, where documented, added another layer to that control. Suspended inside the snow shell, it created a still air gap between the occupied chamber and the blocks. Tracing heat outward reveals the sequence: warm bodies and the lamp, insulating clothing and bedding, the occupied air, a lining and air gap where present, the snow wall, then the outside wind. At the room-facing surface, the snow remained cold. Water vapor from breath, cooking, damp clothing, and the lamp could collect there as frost or a thin frozen layer instead of staying suspended near the bedding. In a heated modern house, frost on an interior wall signals a defect. Here, the cold perimeter helped move part of the moisture load away from the sleeping zone. As you read the diagram, the warmest band belongs around the raised platform, while the inner wall remains colder. Excess heat would erase that useful separation. Once the wall surface began melting, liquid water could drip onto skins, dampen clothing, and weaken the snow blocks. The goal was a workable occupied zone while the shell stayed cold enough to retain its structure and collect moisture at the perimeter. The unexpected mechanism is this: the wall had to remain cold enough to help manage moisture. Comfort depended on keeping the cold in the correct layer. If you want to understand traditional technology through the physical job performed by every part, like the video and subscribe to Birch. Your support lets the channel keep tracing complete systems instead of stopping at the familiar shape of the shelter. That gradient explains why the snow house could outperform European-style alternatives under Arctic constraints. A timber cabin or expedition hut paired rigid walls with a stove and required wood, coal, or oil. A canvas tent traveled more easily, but offered little insulation without liners, snowbanking, or continuous heat. They could reach higher indoor temperatures when fuel and equipment remained available, but carried a larger supply burden. Inuit snow house engineering began with materials present in the environment. The shell blocked wind without transported lumber. The raised platform placed sleepers above the coldest air. Caribou skins reduced heat loss beneath and around the body. A lining, where used, added trapped air. The Qulliq combined light, limited heat, food preparation, and assistance with drying in one hand-scale device. Performance remained specific to the environment. In forest country with abundant fuel, a durable timber building could be the stronger choice. On sea ice or open tundra, a design that requires lumber and a large reserve of fuel becomes vulnerable to transport and resupply. If you compare the systems by their operating demands, the difference is precise. One keeps raising room temperature with fuel, while the other cuts heat loss first and supplies the protected space with modest heat. You can now read the mechanism in one cross-section. The low tunnel keeps the coldest air below the bed. The platform and skins limit heat loss beneath the body. The compact chamber reduces unused volume. Snow blocks the wind and slows heat transfer. A skin lining can add a still air gap. The cold inner surface collects part of the moisture load. Ventilation removes stale, damp air. Bodies and the Qulliq supply the final heat. That answers the question you clicked to resolve. Sleep remained possible at -40 degrees Fahrenheit because Inuit engineering joined height, insulation, airflow, moisture control, body heat, and a small lamp into one thermal chain. The mechanism is complete once every part is returned to its proper scale. The lamp is small. The entrance is lower than the bed. The warmest air is reserved for the occupied zone. The snow wall remains cold. Caribou skins protect the places where the body would otherwise lose heat fastest. None of those parts carries the whole burden, and none can be removed without forcing the others to work harder. That is why the snow house should not be remembered as a dome that somehow became warm. It was a traditional winter shelter organized around controlled loss. Families could survive without electricity or a large supply of wood because the structure reduced wind exposure, conduction, excess air volume, and moisture near the sleeping platform before asking a small flame and body heat to supply the rest. The credit belongs to Inuit peoples, including communities across the Central Arctic and Nunavik, whose documented practices informed this reconstruction. This engineering was developed, tested, and refined across generations in places where a poor thermal decision could not remain theoretical. The vocabulary, materials, and details vary between regions and periods, so no single snow house represents every Inuit community. The shared achievement is the precision with which local materials were assigned specific physical jobs. A snow house was also not a permanent answer for every season or landscape. Its strength appeared under the conditions it was designed to meet: available snow, limited fuel, strong wind, and temperatures low enough to preserve the shell. Judged within those constraints, the system is coherent from the entrance tunnel to the sleeping skins. The useful lesson is not to imitate a historical shelter. It is to notice how thoroughly the design accounted for the body. Heat could not be separated from airflow. Insulation could not be separated from moisture. Bedding could not be separated from floor height. The engineering remained effective because the parts were treated as one thermal system. If you would like another field note that traces traditional cold climate technology with the same care, stay with Birch for the next one. I'm Birch. Until then, I turn the ember orange pencil once between my fingers, tuck it behind my ear, and step away from the diagram. Inside the snow house, the family sleeps warm on the raised platform beneath their caribou skins while the storm continues outside.